Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. I'm so glad you're here again, hopefully. I am Angela Blanted. I am a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm an owner of a private practice called A Bluntiful Life Experience. And very recently, I found out that I am autistic. I'm laughing because it's still funny to me, but it's one of the reasons why I'm here. Not simply because of my latest diagnosis. Because I mean, I am no stranger to the world of neurodivergence because I was unofficially diagnosed with ADHD back in 2020 and then officially diagnosed in 2022 with ADHD. And I was like, I'm gonna take that on the chin. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though I was already practicing as a therapist at the time, there were some things that wasn't really adding up for me at that time. Thus, going out and looking at, what's going on, what's happening, right? I was working on my PhD, my dissertation, got stuck, couldn't like move forward. And I'm just like, oh, I called myself everything but a child of God. Lazy, this, that. Anyway, I just went to seek what was happening, and then I learned about that. So then medication after medication, trial and error, so on and so forth. Medication worked, obviously, but see, with stimulants, it's always going to work for me, and I know that. But anyway, different trial and error. But then there were other things along the way that started happening that didn't really, like ADHD didn't cover, okay? I was like, all right, I've learned a wealth of information about ADHD, not even just for myself, but for the clients that I worked with. And so some things were not just adding up. And I would talk to my doctor about, the medication, and we would try different things, different medications. And one of the reasons why I appreciate my doctor is because he honors and respects me as a clinician. And I sometimes go to him to say, I think this might be good for me. What do you think? He says, oh, I don't see anything wrong with that. And so we go and we take a whirl, and either it works or it doesn't work. So that. And so I was happy about that. But there were just some things that just weren't added up. So obviously, I'm in my 40s. I'm 44 years old, and I think I've officially arrived in the whole world of perimenopause. The only challenge about being in this space is that not too many women, unless you are seeking out this information, are really talking about that. And growing up with our own parents and our elders, they weren't really talking about that. Matter of fact, I only heard them either going from I am sick of my period to I am in full-blown menopause. But what happens in between, nobody was really talking about that. In fact, I'd ask my mom or maybe some older friends of mine. Yes, I have older friends who are in upwards of 60s, 70s, 80s. They don't even really recall that either. And so one of my friends did make a mention. She's older. She said, well, now that they have more terms for these things, then it could have been, but she did not. So now I think it's my responsibility that I know and learn about a lot of this so I can share with the people coming behind me. You know what I'm saying? At least, that's the very least. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I'm doing this. But it was while during, perimenopause, there would be certain moments, because, you always hear about menopause and you always hear about these hot flashes and this, that, and the third. And I was going through the hot flashes, but that wasn't upsetting me. That wasn't the problematic part about the perimenopause. It was like random just mood shifts and all that. When I tell y'all, I got so many tests done to find out what was going on, because my mood was like crap. I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know what was going on. Then the sensory issues, I'll get to all of what was happening, maybe not even in this video, but rather, down the line somewhere. I want to remind you all that I am unscripted, because in my pursuit of living life, I realized that a lot of my life was lived masking, performing, and I got burnt out in 2025 at the end. I was completely burnt out. And I thought it was just like my workload and all that, and part of it was, but it wasn't really management of self. And I thought that I was like in a place in my life where I was keeping it real, live, and funky, but I wasn't. And there were just certain areas of that I wasn't keeping it real, particularly in my consumption of projects, because me and projects, like doing stuff. And I'm talking about projects, not even projects for myself, projects for others, The external validation is real. Anyway, and we'll get to that. But I was masking in that those projects weren't problematic. I was having a hard time. Coupled with some other things that was going on. And so, or trying to tell myself, see, I was gaslighting myself for real. And I know the real definition of gaslighting, so I can absolutely tell you that I was doing that. It wasn't even invalidating myself. It was gaslighting myself to believe that certain things that I stopped doing that was quite routine was like no longer needed. Like, I am taking my power back. I'm not doing this thing. Meanwhile, I was dealing with skills regression. Like, I couldn't do the thing, but I didn't want to admit that, right? So I'm kind of shaping up what was happening. It's one thing that, I'm getting my period. I'm dealing with PMDD. I get real dark and gloomy and irritable and all that before my period, get my period. Oh, what's up? Well, go on to the next thing. And then you could kind of predict that, set yourself up for that. But it was like, okay, before period, while period, after period, some weeks after, it was like all the time. I went to my doctor one day and said, my brain feels like it's detached from my head. I don't know what's going on. I thought I was losing it. I didn't know. I said, okay, maybe, take it off a day or two. It would not even be to take off a long weekend, take some days off. It was not a reset like that. It was like, every part of your life must be assessed, and you have to look at where you're masking. Bottom line, whether it be to yourself, the portrayal somewhere in the people that whatever. And so then I started looking more into the perimenopause. The autism wasn't a thing. I wasn't even thinking about that because of my own ignorance. And I will tell you that as a licensed mental health counselor, even as someone who has worked in times past with people who are autistic, they have a full diagnosis, high performing, high functioning, but still. But I was like, because it wasn't lining up with me and myself and what I was doing. And that's why many of us who don't appear to be, and honey, when I say, I think I kind of mentioned that maybe I should look into this, and oh my God, the critical views on that one. Oh, no, you're not this, you're not that. And I have been told that so long. In fact, one time I had a therapist to tell me that they didn't even believe that I was introverted. Like, if I'm telling you that, all right, I mean, maybe you might question that within yourself, but it is your role to be curious about that anyway. So I got to the point in my own space, and I got to the point where I needed to ask myself this very one question. And it was, okay, how do high-performing neurodivergent people build lives that work for them instead of constantly adapting themselves to everyone else's narratives? Again, that's my question. That was my question. Because the adjusting and the performing and the showing up and the over-explaining and the trying to endure loud noises and feelings and touches and look over to your neighbor, greet your neighbor, that was becoming a problem. And these are all spaces where expectations are very present. And I was living in all those spaces. And I was the problem. If I remember working at a job and I was in a cubicle. This was after coming from a beautiful office. And I just simply told those people, okay, I'm gonna be in this cubicle, you know what I'm saying? It's a whole new job, I got you. if y'all could do something about these lights, because it was fluorescent lights, it would be a my coworkers were looking at me like I was crazy. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to have these fluorescent lights on me all day. I didn't even know what was, if that was a problem like this. And this was years ago. This was some time ago. This was even before I probably went into perimenopause. So that's why we found the autism diagnosis, because some of the things that were happening to me, I thought were normal to myself, but with the perimenopause exasperating the symptoms, and I couldn't just manage. So what you are going to have to do is kind of look at some of your behaviors before any sort of period of time, especially if you're a woman and you're going through like this moment that I'm in. Then you gotta have to look at some of the behaviors and line them up. And that's what I just had to do. Take inventory of those behaviors, because you will be asked those questions. And it was like, this happened before that. This is just a problem. This is just magnifying what's already there. And so for the life of me, I would have never considered looking into that. But I'm so glad I did. And was it oh my God, it was just a shock. It was, and I'm still dealing with that, and I'm still learning, and I'm still trying to rewrite some of the scripts. So that's why I've decided to do this, and do this out loud, unscripted. I don't really even care any longer about what this looks like, because let me tell you again, if you watch the first video, I've been thinking about this podcast, which was going to be something completely different. Bless the Lord for having me to wait, because it was for this type of thing. Those who look like they got it all together, meanwhile they're living internally, they are suffering. And for a long time, suffering, myself. I mean, I would cry because I thought for a long time, ladies and gentlemen, that I was the problem. I thought I was the problem. I thought I was like, I got to get up out of mental health counseling. I can't counsel people like this. No, I could counsel people, but I want to keep it real, and I'm going to provide myself with the accommodations so that it can be a safe space for the both of us. And that could still happen, because at the very least, clients want us as therapists, at least the ones I work with, to be real. And they appreciate that. And those who don't, you got to go. And that's okay, because there are many other therapists out here in this world, okay? So I was going to pack up my bags. I was going to do a lot of things. But I had this podcast idea since 2022. I was going to do something else. Something that was probably going to be cheesy to me. You know what I'm saying? You know, with this kind of brain, I will think of an idea. And that's one thing about me. I have ideas out the Watusi, baby. And I will have 17 tabs up to look at each of these ideas. There are a lot of things that I do, and I'm going to share with you all about what it really looks like to be like me, right? And I know there are so many other people like me. I hope there are more Black women like me, and that's not to be exclusive, because everyone is welcomed here. But what I am saying is there are a lot of barriers that Black women have to go through when it comes to, okay, these are my accommodations, this is what I need. No, I'm not an angry Black woman. You got me? There's a lot of that we have to like scratch through. Meanwhile, some of this is just like our behaviors. Like, this isn't like our personalities at the end of the day, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just not, it may be different, but there's nothing wrong with that. Fun fact, maybe a couple of years ago, I was like, I love to be creative, so I make like graphic art designs and such. So I was making a t-shirt design, and I was somehow intuitively lured into creating an autism t-shirt design with just like eyes and like the puzzle around the eyes. And I was just like, why am I so fixated on just creating this? And I just don't, I'm always looking into some mini baking situation. Like, I'm always doing that. But I had that this morning that came to me. And I was like, why was I making that? I was like spending hours on that. Special interest. Come to the front. So all in all, I'm not going to be like dropping down the mic on this. I'm just coming back to be as consistent as I can. And not because I'm thinking about what people want to see, but rather I'm using my intuitive guide. So like when I feel compelled to make a video, and I know that I'm not gonna be scripting, because baby, you talking about somebody who's 44 who spent years on some different scripts, baby, different scripts. I don't recall where I was going with that, but you see what I'm saying. We will see. Oh yeah. I'm not gonna end on no special note, but what I will say is, for those who are going to embark upon this journey with me, I'm so glad you're here. And if you resonate, drop a comment or two down below and tell me, what is it like for you to be in a neurodivergent, late diagnosed specifically, right? And you could be undiagnosed as well. That's fine. In terms of, that you could see. I mean, I always tell my clients, you ain't crazy. At the end of the day, you're getting information, whether it be from Reddit, whether you get it from TikTok, whatever, YouTube. And I'm not saying that it's wise to be, going, because symptoms, diagnoses, they overlap. The symptoms for each of the these diagnoses, they can overlap, and you could be sitting around here thinking you something, and then you're not really that, right? But if you have to finally make sense of like what's going on and okay, what is my design here, then I endorse, promote, and support you to go ahead and do that. But maybe this is your first step to finding out more information, because I have clients now that I like clearly know they meet the criteria bottom line, but they're not ready to take the next step to going to see a psychologist to go get a full evaluation. That's fair as well. They're allowed to do that. And so we just kind of talk about what they're experiencing, and we do so in a very conversational way. So with that being said, you take your time. If you want to be here, get for more information, maybe I know sometimes I'll look in comments and I'll get a lot of answers. I mean, the videos are great, but sometimes the comments will tell me everything I need to know. And that helps the community, if you will. All right, guys, I've already taken deep small talk into the next gear. I mean, meaning time. Because I don't like small talk. So that's the essence. Can we have the smaller talk without like these long videos getting deep? Y'all feel me? All right. Bye.